Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing up tonight. I'm the guy with the furry thing on his shirt. I'm thrilled to be here. This is great. I didn't know, actually, before I came, just how high-ranked a school this is in the rankings, and having met the kids and having met the teachers, I understand why. And I think this is really, it's always interesting to me because it means that we have a special responsibility. We get kids who are really good and who really can make a huge difference in the world, and so it's our job to make sure that you kids and all of you can do that. So I'll talk a little bit about the future of education and as I see it. And I'm going to give you vision, which is the vision that I see emerging, but I'm not inventing it. I'm curating it. What I do is I go around the world and I watch what people are doing, and I say, oh, that's interesting. That's a lot like what that's doing, and that's what this person is doing. So I see a vision emerging, and that's what I want to share with you, and I think it's a good vision and the right vision for the future. And it's based around a goal of making your world as a young person a better place. And I had a big discussion when I wrote the book with somebody who said, I had originally said better the world, and he said, yeah, from whose perspective? And I said, well, from the perspective of the kids, because it's their world. And he said, yeah, it's their world. And he got a dedication at the beginning of the book for those two letters, for the I and the R. So I'm concerned about the world, and I think we all need to be concerned about young people everywhere. But today we're here, and I love that your kids do this. My kid does it too. I will share, if you have any interest in what I say, you can send me an email. I will be happy to share the slides and also to have any kind of conversation that you'd like to have in email. Welcome. So I'm going to start with this proposition, and I hope many or all of you agree with it. We all want our kids to be educated. We want educated kids in the world. And I would even add to it that we want all kids to be educated. Anybody disagree? Because that's a different discussion. But the point is that what's changing is what an education is and what being educated means. And I think that's going to go through some very big changes, and we're starting to see it in places like this, and it's causing issues, and it's causing us to have, in fact, these very conversations. And we can look at education's future from two time frames. We can look at the short term, which is incremental reforms. We've added this, we've done this, we've changed this program, we're doing team teaching, we're doing a lot of things that we add to this. And that's the way most people think, okay, that's education reform. And who's added the most things? But I look at long term. I'm concerned about what's emerging in the world that may someday replace, not completely necessarily, but will be a better fit for the kids than the things that we do today. So we'll talk about that. If you've got kids who are seniors, I don't know if they look like seniors to me, you're interested in college. You're interested in how they get to university, what they can do, and all the things that they do in the diploma program and why we're in this school. But suppose, as I met somebody yesterday who just had a baby, right? Somebody on the faculty. If you're thinking about this kid, you're starting to think on a 20-year time horizon, because that's what it's going to take before they're out of school and into the world. So how should they be educated? How should that kind of person be educated? And what we've tended to do in the past, and one of the things that brings us all here, is there's huge traditions. We then do whatever we do today, and that's important. We think a little bit about what we're going to do tomorrow, and we make some changes. But we don't think a lot about what Peter Hinson calls the day after tomorrow. And that's important because from the kids' perspective, that's all that counts. That's when they're going to be there. It's the day after tomorrow. The other stuff is great as support, but that's what they would like us to focus on so that they're ready for it. So in reforms, often we just go to tomorrow when what we really need to do is go to the day after tomorrow. And that's kind of where I want to take us this evening. Because all our kids, everywhere in the world, here at the school and anywhere else, need to get to the future not equipped for the world of yesterday. We all know that's a world of reading and writing. That's what it's been for a very long time, and that's what we focus a lot on. But they need to be equipped with the skills and experiences that are going to allow them to function and thrive in a very, very different context of the future. And I just took this picture in a cafe in Palo Alto. That girl's on a date with somebody. God knows who's on the other side of that phone. Simon described that when he was in Oman, that's what they did, and the other person was somewhere in the same cafe, but they couldn't talk directly to each other, so they did that. But all these new things are coming that didn't exist when those of us who are adults grew up. And so the kids need to be the people that they want to be in their times, and not just the people we want them to be. And we have to be really careful as adults and as parents that we don't lay too much on the kids, because a lot of things that were true in our world are not necessarily going to be true in their world. What's changing is what an education is in this new world and what being educated means. And that's what we're going to try to explore a little bit. How do we do it? Right? My guess is that all the young people in this room will have the possibility of going to outer space or being weightless. I mean, it seems to me that anybody who wants to do that, who's young today, will be able to do that. And what we have to recognize is these kids have new power. Am I blocking your view? I'm not going to block your view. And we have to ask how to unleash that power. And I think that's a lot of the way we're going to look at education, as unleashing the power of our kids to better their world, power that they never had in the past. So my latest thinking, which I put into this book, Education to Better Their World, any Spanish-speaking people in the room? Any Korean-speaking people in the room? It's going to come out in Korean. Not in German, unfortunately. Any German-speaking people in the room? Good. But the point is that there's a huge wall between the current education and the new and better education that we're looking for. And it's a very stiff wall, and sometimes we see it here. The IB program is very rigid, and so we throw a lot of darts. We add things, 21st century skills, social emotional skills, lots of technology or choice or classes or standards, different in every country, but they don't really get through to preparing the kids. They do to a certain extent. They might get the kids into college, but it's not enough. Anybody ever read the book called Crossing the Chasm? It's a book that was around in the 60s, not the 60s, probably the 80s, by a guy named Jeff Moore, and it was originally about technology. He said, well, here's the problem when you invent new technology. You've got the inventors, that's that group. Oh, I can actually use my pointer here if I can figure out how it works. Yes, you've got this group, which is me and Gary Steger and the other people who've come here who have interesting ideas. We have influenced some people, and there are some early adapters. But what we want is, if we're right, and this is important, for the majority of the people in the world, the teachers in the world, the schools in the world, to go in these directions. And that's hard. It's hard to cross that chasm. It took the IB a long time to cross that chasm. We were just talking about their history. And when you do cross, you'll get people who will accept it, then you'll get people who accept it a little later, and you will always have people who will never accept it, the laggards. But it's a very difficult thing to cross, and that's the stage that we're in now. And it's not till people really understand what we're doing and what this means for their kids, and that it's actually good for their kids, until we understand that, we're less likely to move across that chasm. But wait is what I hear from a lot of people. right? This is a great school. This gets a lot of kids into a lot of good colleges. It works. We're good. And so why would I want to change? Why would I want to make the kinds of changes that will be big and different? And the answer is for our kids, because this came from The Economist. We have thought for a long time, and there's data and you can look it up, that the going to college, going to university, gets you a much higher income over your lifetime. There's a correlation there. But what they're discovering now is that that correlation is less caused by what the university does for and to the kids, and more to who the kids are. And the university is a badge. Essentially, it's saying your peers are at Harvard or MIT or wherever it is. You should go there and get that badge. And so the idea that we want all our kids to go to college is in the process of changing. It's not changing as fast as we may want it to or some think it is, but it is evolving. And so I'm trying to think of the root causes. Why do people go through all the rigor that it takes to get an IB diploma and then still come out the other end and maybe do or don't get into the school they want, or do or don't know what they want to do, or do or don't succeed in life? And I've talked about engagement and pedagogy and curriculum and what education is about, what its ends are. And I've written a book on each one of these things. And I think there's two things that are happening that are really fundamental that we have to pay attention to. The first one is conflating learning and education. And people think of this in different ways, but I see education not as the system, but as what happens when you start this high and you wind up as an adult. That process, however you get it, is your education. And we all know about the School of Hard Knocks, or you know about, you can get it at a school like this. Learning is a part of that, but it's not the actual education. The education, it's not even the goal of the education, it's a means to the education. So learning is a means to kids becoming good, effective, world-improving people. And that's, I think, why we send our kids to these schools or to any school. That's why we as people pay money to educate our kids, so that they will become good, in whatever sense you want to call that, the Dalai Lama or anybody else, effective, and that they will go out and improve their world. If you accept that as the goal, then there's a better means, which is real world accomplishment, getting things done. We started, I was here yesterday when the kids showed off their projects, and they were really on the beginning of that road, because that's what we need in the world. We don't need a lot of academics, we don't need a lot of people with degrees, we need a lot of people who can get things done, and hopefully the right things done, and continuously improve the world. So that may be nothing new. People send their kids to school so we will have a better world. But we used to do it very indirectly, and still do, through the academic model. We say, we're going to put together a set of content that we think kids need. They're going to learn it, hopefully. They will become improved people because of that, mostly in an intellectual sense. And then we put this big bet on the table. And the big bet is our graduates are going to become people who go out and improve the world. And some of them do, and they were just looking at, I met a young man who was looking at the graduates of this school for the 50th anniversary, and we found some people who certainly did improve the world. But not everybody does. So that model is really not as efficient as we want it to be. And what's replacing it, what's coming into the world, is this something that's called the Icann Paradigm. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about that, where we take kids starting from kindergarten, and even before kindergarten, and we put you together with real world problems that you perceive. You know, you look out the window, or you look at your family, or you look where you are, and you say, you know, that's a real problem. And then we say, okay, let's get together in a team and find some solutions. And it's amazing that kids come up with solutions that often we hadn't thought of at all. And so the world improves. And that's really good, but the kicker, the more important thing, is that we get people who know and go on to improve their world forever because they know they can improve their world, they know how to improve their world because they've done that as their education. So that's where I see things are going. And it's complex because we have two traditions. For millennia, the tradition of education that was in the world, the way we did education, is through what I call the accomplishment tradition. Parent to son or daughter, master to apprentice. We showed kids how to do it, they did it, and they accomplish things, and then they get better at accomplishment. Along the way, wherever it started, Socrates and beyond, we developed an academic tradition. And that was a thinking tradition. And people like to think things out, and those people who were good thinkers and who were interested in that went to these academic institutions. And what's interesting is that the first tradition, the accomplishment tradition, is still with us. It's in our workplaces. The academic tradition somehow came to dominate our schools. So a school like this, which is considered one of the best schools in the world, is a very academically oriented school. And most of us come from this academic tradition. I bet almost every adult in the room has had those clothes on at one point in your life. I certainly have. But this is really important, that thinking alone, even if it is critical thinking, which we all know is important, even if it's problem solving, which we all know is important, is not enough unless it's combined with effective action, effective relationships, and effective accomplishment. And that's why we know that what we call academics live in an ivory tower. They're not out there accomplishing anything for the world except for some research and study, but they're not the mass of the people that we want and that we need. So it's time to put those two traditions back together. It's time we did that, and we have an education that, yes, spends time on thinking, but also on action and relationships and accomplishment. And so, because I think those are equally important, that means thinking, as important as it is a quarter, maybe, of what kids really need. And we have to understand that and move forward. Because if we just keep teaching our kids that 1/4 of what they need, they're not going to have enough, and they're not going to succeed in the way we need to succeed and go where they want to go. And I think places like the International Baccalaureate are starting to realize that. And so they're starting to make changes. And when we looked at the PYP and the MYP, the younger kids, they were not conceived of with the same kind of academic rigor as the diploma program. And so we're starting to see that groups like that make changes and rethink what they do. And it's not an easy or a fast process, but we're part of that process. And we have ideas here about how we would like to reshape some of the things that they do. So that's one idea, the fact that learning and education are not necessarily the same thing. But here's a bigger idea that really makes a very big difference to our kids. And I think it's the root of the educational problems in the world. And it's the way we look at our kids, the way we see them, the way we treat them. And even in places like this, and I know this because I've had discussions with people, and I certainly have had discussions with kids all over the world, we under-respect them. The main thing that kids ask for in the world when you talk to them is more respect from adults. We underappreciate what they can do. We come out of the projects like yesterday, and we are all saying, wow, look at what they did. Wow, look at what they did. Wow, my kid can do this on his iPad. Wow. When we should say, oh yeah, That's what kids can do. And therefore, we underestimate what they can do, and we don't, while we give them some challenges, and especially challenges from the past, we don't give them enough challenges that are moving towards the future. So at its worst, and I'm not in any way saying we all do this, but at its worst, what it feels like to kids as if they're being treated like pets. They're told where to sit, where to go, what to do, who to follow. We make them perform the tricks that we teach them. That's the tests that we give them. We're saying perform. And we say, oh, you just have to prepare yourself for college. What else is there? So that's not the greatest way to make somebody enthusiastic and want to do the future. I think it's time to stop seeing them as little us's, because we were like that in school. It was good that people told us that stuff, oh, you need structure and stuff. And I had a very interesting conversation with the student council yesterday, where they were saying, you know, we get a little bit more freedom. We were talking about this pets idea, and they say, well, we get more freedom as we get older, and we're more experienced, and we can take more responsibility. And I said to them, don't you think that it would be better if we started earlier? If we gave the kid, they said, no, the kids need structure. And that's the argument. I said, well, yeah, because we've never given them freedom. And we've never given them the opportunity to do these things, especially because now they are people with extended brains all networked together. And the fact that each one of these kids that I'm looking at has an iPad or has a phone or has whatever they have means that's who they are. Their brains are extended and they are networked. And that has never existed in the world before. It just didn't exist, certainly didn't exist in my generation. These kids are empowered with huge new capabilities to do almost everything in new ways and better ways, certainly better ways for them. And if we don't take better advantage of that, then I think we're just missing a huge boat. Because to succeed and thrive in this millennium, the kids require an education that's different. And it's hard to see this, but it's as big a change as when people thought the earth was flat to when suddenly they were told it was round. And it took a long time for a lot of people to say, oh my God, because there's big implications to that, there's lots of things. That was a huge change. It was a big change going from the Ptolemaic system where everything goes around the earth to we're just a planet going around the sun. Another huge change in perspective that people had to accept, and it took them a while to understand that perspective. So I think there's another change in perspective, and I'm going to talk to you about it, that we need to think about at this moment in time. And I think that because I see this coming up all over the globe. So when I'm here, I talk to a couple of people, and I have who think this way. When I go to almost every country I go to, I see people thinking that way. I see schools starting based on these ideas. I see individual teachers doing things differently, and I see kids acting differently. I see it at the IB to some extent. I see it in organizations like Ashoka that talks about change makers. I see it in organizations like Design for Change, and that's the organization that wants to infect kids with the Icann virus. And they're growing. And in 2 years, we're all going to be in the Vatican because the Pope invited that group to be there and hold their conference there. I see it in individual schools, in High Tech High in San Diego, Riverside School in India, concept schools in Brazil. I'm sure if I looked around in Germany, I'd find schools like that as well. So the question we can ask is, why is this happening? Why is it emerging, and why is it emerging now? When just at the time when we think we've got, things perfected and we're way up at the top of the list of international schools, why are they doing this to us? And to answer that question, I went back to a book that I had read in college. Anyone in the audience read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions? I don't know if they do. Well, good, I can introduce you to a new book. It's the book that was written, came out, actually I was in college at that point, introduced the idea of paradigms, described scientific revolution as the process of moving from paradigm to paradigm, and offered a theory about how that change happens. And it occurred to me, this might apply to education. So here's what Kuhn says. A paradigm is not just what we do. It's how we look at the world. It's that lens through which we see the world. Is it flat? Is it round? Is it earth-centric? Is it sun-centric? And that defines what he called the normal practices in the field. He talks about normal science. So we do normal teaching. And that's not bad. It's normal in the sense of norms. That's what we have done for 200 years or more. We send in front of the class, we give them content, we all know what that is. That's normal. And that doesn't just stay the same, it improves. We figure out new ways to do things, we figure out team teaching, we figure out other kinds of things. But this is the real way we are seeing kids now. I think this is the educational paradigm we have. Our kids are essentially starting out helpless. And therefore, they need us to teach them everything they know. You know, it's the old saying, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, right? Before that, you didn't know anything. The goal that we have is to produce better individuals. And it's very individually focused, and we tell them don't look at your friend's paper and don't work in team. It's very individually focused, and our process is classroom education with content and tests and rankings and degrees. And that's what we do. We follow here the paradigm, and that's not bad, because that's the normal paradigm of education. But what Kuhn points out is that all those methods that we use because of that paradigm are fine until we have anomalies, until something changes and that paradigm doesn't work anymore. And when that happens, and we have one today, my sense is that now we have kids who have much more power. So we have an anomaly that we didn't have before. We never had kids that had extended minds all networked together. And that's new. And what happens, what he calls crisis, emerges. And it's intractable. You can't tinker with the system and make it work. You have to really do something different and think differently and see people differently. And I think that a lot of people would agree, and I don't know whether you will, but you can think about it. We are in a period of educational crisis now because keep thinking about this. Where do I send my kid? What school is really going to be the best to prepare them for the future, given who they are? And it displaces this conceptual network, the way we see things, the way we see kids, the way we see schools. And sometimes this takes a period of time. It can take a long time for it to be seen that it's really changing what we normally do, the established order, but eventually an old paradigm gets replaced by the new one. Yes, now everybody thinks the earth is round, and very few people, if any, think the world is flat, whereas it was the opposite before then. So I think this is the new paradigm that's emerging. This is the way we're starting to see kids and the world in education, that they start out, they come to us as empowered. They come to us as people who can do a whole lot of things that we normally don't pay attention to, and when we do, we go, wow. And our job is to empower them more. And the goal that we give them is not to become just better individuals, but to make their world a better place, to better their world. And the process is that the best way to do that is by giving them a series of projects. And now in the IB, we do one a year, or one every couple of years, or a couple every year, but there's a process where you can do continuous projects, which is essentially what work is becoming. Work is a series of projects now. And at IBM, I was talking to somebody who said, we don't even create job descriptions anymore. We only create project descriptions. So this is much more of a refinement. This is not tweaking. There's a big picture of change, and I'll leave this up for a few seconds here. We're moving from learning to becoming. We're moving from bettering yourself as your goal to bettering your world. We're moving from being empowered to learn, and we're not saying learning is bad, but we want you to use that learning to take positive action in the world. We don't want you just to find your passion, which we do, but we want you to go further and apply that passion to making your world a better place and learning how to do that. We don't want you to just get high rankings in PISA or any other test. We want you to get things done, and that's the demonstration that you have moved ahead. We don't just want you to be academics or think like academics. We want you to think like people, because most people are not academics. And it's not just that we don't know what's coming, and a lot of people say this rightly, because we don't. We don't know what the world's going to look like in 10, 20 years exactly. We know a few things. But we want kids who are prepared for anything. Right? No matter what happens in your world or your world or your world, or the young people who are sitting here, you need to be ready for it. You know, and say, oh, I wish my education had been a little different. So how do we get there? I talk about going beyond reforms, and because the reforms tend to be incremental to a new kind of education. And what Kuhn reminds us, and this is why it was so interesting to me, is that when this happens, when we're in this crisis like we are now, our perception of the world needs to be re-educated. We go into the same situations, and we have to see things differently. He calls it a man wearing new lenses. And so let's look at some new lenses. Let's get some new perspectives on what we have to do. First, the world. I know you all know the world is changing. However fast you think it's changing, I guarantee it's changing more quickly. It's changing faster. Because every day with the 8 billion people in the world, or 7 point whatever billion people in the world, they are making those changes. And if you look at the graph of population over time, for millennia, nothing changed. It was very low, it was the same. And all of a sudden, in the last 100 years or less, it started going exponentially through the roof. And that's innovation, and that's creativity. A lot of things are on that same exponential curve. So we're living in a very different period that wasn't experienced to that extent in the past. And what's happening is that the new technologies that have come out are not just individuals, not just AI or AR or VR or computers or networking or biology. They're all converging. They're all coming together now. So that's something, again, we haven't seen before. And you can't just say, well, one of these things, you know, is social networking is increasing. No, it's increasing as all of these things increase. And then what's called VUCA. Anybody ever heard the term VUCA? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. It's a term that the military uses a lot. That's going up everywhere. That makes for a difficult world, and especially the pace of change. So it's not change that's happening that concerns us, it's how fast change is happening. It's the fact that, well, just when we got used to having a mobile phone, we need a new mobile phone. And just when we thought we could replace it every year, we have to replace it every 6 months. And that pace is picking up. So we have to educate our students for that world. And what's interesting is that we're educating different students. And that's really something I think the biggest change in our focus is the perspective on students. They have so many capabilities, particularly with the technology, but also with many other cultural things, that they're not the same people we were when we were in school. And that's a huge mistake sometimes we make in our thinking, saying, I remember when I was in 5th grade or I was in 12th grade, and I did this, and therefore that applies to my kids. And it very well may not, because they're so much more empowered than in the past, and they're people with, as we said, extended brains all networked together. they can do so much more than we ever could. They can collaborate in totally new ways. And let me give you a few examples. So primary school kids are mapping the brain. How many of you have ever heard of the game iWire? It's a software game. Every kid could get it on their iPad. It gives you a little tiny, tiny section of the brain and says, where do all these neurons go? Because it turns out that people are good at that, figuring that out. So our elementary school kids, primary school kids, can and are doing that. In one place, 12-year-old middle school kids were printing prosthetic arms. And that's easy to do, actually, if you have a 3D printer. Do you have a 3D printer in the makerspace? Okay, good, you have it. There's a site called Enable that has all the plans for these things. So you can print an arm, and I just met a double amputee who said, you know, those arms are better than my $100,000 arms that I got, 10, 20 years ago. But they can go further. Because what good is printing a prosthetic hand if you don't have a person who needs one? So then the social media skills come into play. And they can go online and they can find the kids who need them, and they bring those kids in. They have hand-a-thons, and this is not just one place, this is now multiple places, where they custom design the hands for the size of the people who need the hands. That's middle schoolers. High schoolers, let's just take apps. There's lots of other things. They're curing diseases in many cases. But a family in Atlanta, Georgia, had the police come to their house late at night. And they discovered in the first 5 minutes it was a mistake. But because the family were black-skinned, the cops said, oh, well, just to be sure, we'll put you through the computer. And the family was very offended, as they should have been. And the 3 teenagers in that family who had studied some programming said, we're going to make an app to rate the police, rate the encounter. Do you have Yelp here in Germany or something like Yelp? It's Yelp for the police. So every time you have a police encounter, you do it, and then you can go into the cloud and you can say, well, the police in Düsseldorf are different than the police in Berlin or the police in any other place. These are teenagers doing this. Bullying, is that a problem in Germany? It's certainly a problem in the US and many other places. Kids couldn't find a lunch table to sit at where they weren't bullied. What did this young girl do? I think she was 16. She said, I'm going to write an app that lets kids reserve a seat at a non-bullying lunch table, guaranteed. It's like Open Table we have in the US for kids. So they can do that and have a seat where they're not bullied. It's an app, she wrote it, it's out. Another one recently said, my grandmother has Alzheimer's and she has trouble recognizing people and recognizing faces. But we have facial recognition now. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to show her and scan all the pictures of the people that she knows, and I'm going to help her recognize who if somebody walks into the room and she can hold up this app, and it will say, oh yeah, that's your uncle, or that's your son, or whatever it is. So this exists. This is what high school kids are doing. And it's just the beginning because there's huge numbers of these. And there's a database that I put together with more than 100 of these that you can scroll through and sort by different ages and different things, and it will give you the details of the project and videos and what kids have done. So this is happening throughout the world. And it's like what I saw yesterday, but it's sort of on steroids. It's going further than this. Okay, but let's combine that with the other big elephant in the room for young people today, which is automation. Right? We all know, we all hear the statistics that jobs are disappearing and everything's going to do this, and their kids are going into this new human-machine age. And the key problem is going to be, what do we keep for the humans, and what do we delegate to the machines? Because think about it. Reading and writing are machine skills. Right? Your computer can read this stuff and can write articles. Researching is becoming a machine skill. Translating is becoming a machine skill. And even thinking, especially with artificial intelligence, is becoming, not all of it, but certain parts of it, a machine skill. Scary. And even more scary is that anything that 2 people can do equally well can and will be automated. so that the parts of being a lawyer that 2 lawyers can do equally well are automated. Parts of being a teacher that 2 teachers can do equally well, automated. So what are the parts that won't be automated? What are the human skills that we keep? How do you as a parent or an educator make your son or daughter or child able to be valuable in a world where so much is being automated? And that, to me, the answer to that is uniqueness. Is that it's our job to figure out how you and you and you and you are unique, not in how you look, but we all are unique in what we care about, what strengths we have, and what we love to do. And the combination of those is what we need. And that's what I've been telling the kids and the teachers and parents, is that if you can help your kid figure out at any point in their lives the answers to those questions, they're going to be in much better shape than if they can't. And when I talked to the student council, they said, well, yeah, we got to do that, but we don't know what we want to do in the world, and it's too early, and we're young, and I said, no, I don't mean in life. I'm not asking you when you're in school to answer those questions for life. I'm saying today. What is it that you care about? Look around at all the problems that you see in your home, in your world, in your country, and in your school, and which ones matter to you? What are you good at that's going to help you address problems like that? And lastly, what do you love to do? Because you don't want to get good at something that you'd hate, and that happens to a lot of people. So that's the job we need to do as a school, as educators, as teachers, as parents. Help our kids figure out how they're unique in those ways, and then apply that to bettering the world. And then suddenly they can understand not just what their purpose is and what they want to do, but that they can do it and how to do it. So let me spend the last few minutes giving you sort of the pieces of this vision very, very broadly of how this new education looks. It starts with the changing view of kids, which we've seen, right? Extended brains all network together. We look at our kids different. That's the huge change in paradigm, and that they have new capabilities. And we start taking advantage of that. And we say, writing papers is great, but our kids can go way beyond that now. The second is the ends, which is not becoming better individuals, but becoming a better world, or helping build the better world. And saying, having our kids understand from the very beginning, from when they're in kindergarten, that's really what I'm after. That's my goal. That's why they're educating me, so that in my own unique way, I can make the world, my world, a better place. It's not about academic success. It has been, it still is if you want to go into certain colleges, et cetera, but it really is about becoming good, effective, world-improving people. And I was having this discussion with somebody in the faculty, I think this morning, that if once you tell kids that, and they realize that, which we don't always tell them, they can start to work in those directions. And we need to help them understand these 3 things that I talked about. And I hope you take those away with you and have discussions with your kids. Because that really should be the huge goal of what we're doing in primary and secondary school, is helping kids figure out what they care about and what they're good at and what they love to do. The means is not just the learning of the past, as we talked about, but real-world accomplishment leading to real-world improvement. And the reasons for this, and this is what I love when people say these things to me, but a guy from, I think, again, it was IBM, said, the best predictor of future accomplishment is past accomplishment. So if you don't start accomplishing when you're young, we're not able to predict as well who's going to do well and who are going to be the people who are effective. But if we start them accomplishing young, they will continue to do that. And this goes back a couple of hundred years. Thomas Carlyle is the Scottish Enlightenment. Anybody here from Scotland? Okay. Nothing builds self-esteem and self-confidence like accomplishment. And that's, again, what we want to have in our kids, self-esteem, self-confidence. So we need not just the learning, not just the achievement, not just the grades, but real-world accomplishment. And that's what I was so proud of the kids yesterday who were doing these projects. And you can talk to anybody who went there, and they will tell you how proud the kids were themselves and full of self-esteem and self-confidence, and that they would go out and do this thing again. And the interesting thing about that is that that has two parts. When they do these personal projects, they have to do the project, and they have to write a paper. And the paper is the very traditional thing. And what I was hearing in many cases was that the paper was interfering with the kids having the time and enthusiasm and all these things to actually do the kinds of projects that change the world that they have to do. So that's a problem we need to address. As a school, as the International Baccalaureate, as all these things, where do we want our kids to put their focus for the future? And I think the change is from individuals and grades and rankings and personal success to teams and real-world improving projects and real-world results. And the more we can produce that and have kids that do that, the better off the kids will be, and the better they will be when they're going to college, because that's increasingly what colleges are looking for. And certainly that's how the top colleges sort out their peers, by the people who can improve the world and the people who produce these real-world results. And the kids are, I love this word from my friend Zoe, solutionaries. The interesting part for me is that it's not just better for the kids, it's better for the employers. Because employers complain about the kids that we put out of school. And one of their biggest complaints, and this is Larry Page and Sergey Brin of Google, and this is just taken right off their website, they need people who can get things done in the world. And academic education is not preparation for that. It's part of the foundation, but it doesn't prepare you directly for that. So they don't even ask you at Google where you went to school. They don't want to see your transcript. They don't want to see any of that stuff. They just ask you, what projects did you do? What results did they have? And then they talk to you and see how you think. Teachers. How many in the audience are teachers? I know some of you are. I've met some of you. Incredibly important. Teachers aren't going away. How could you raise a kid without adult guidance? I think it would be very difficult, and those kids don't necessarily turn out the best. But it's not the same role as it used to be. In some cases it still is, but it's moving quickly away from the content delivery. Most of that content is somewhere on the internet. If you're looking at math, Sal Khan may explain a lot better than your math teacher. What he can't do, because he's not there, is coaching and empowerment. And that's the role that teachers are starting to have, because this ties back to the uniqueness part. The teacher is the person in front of that kid who knows how your kid is unique. What is it about you that's different than the other people in your class? And that's what we have to help our kids figure out and bring out. And that's not what we've done. In the past, we've really tried to make people more alike. We've really tried to say, okay, you know, you have an IB diploma, that means you're like all the other kids who have an IB diploma, or not exactly, but more like that. Now we're looking for the uniqueness. It comes through the projects. And my friend, one of the best teachers I know in Palo Alto, invented an acronym called TRIC: Trust, Respect, Independence, Collaboration, and Kindness. And that is what she practices every day with her kids. It works. The kids tell us they want trust. They love to be respected. You know, she gives them her home phone number and said, you can call me if you have a problem, and it's a real problem. You can call me up till X hour at night. She will give the kids, I watch her, she gives the kids keys to all these things, and she trusts her kids. And the only way to, and she writes this, the only way to trust kids is to actually do it. You actually have to put them in situations where you trust them to do things that, you might think at the beginning are a little uneasy, but they come through, plus the empathy and the encouragement that machines don't provide, that the humans provide. And this is what her former students say about her. She showed me I could take my dreams as seriously as I wanted. And my perspective in the world is that every kid has dreams. If you probe and you think and you get them to express themselves, they have dreams at any moment in their lives. You have dreams? Yes. So it's not about content delivery, it's about coaching and empowerment. And now, technology. And technology is a big deal, and we have lots of it here, and it's really nice, and I saw the kids using it, and they were enjoying it. And Simon tells the story about how a kid had done a video, and Simon said, I'd like to see it, and the kid said, oh, I'll just airdrop it to you. Right? So the kids can do amazing things with this stuff. But it's important that we don't just use it for things we could already do. So when we use the technology for writing and reading and searching and note-taking and all these kind of things, my sense is that that is trivial. That's trivial uses of technology. And it's not trivial in the sense that reading and writing are trivial. Those things aren't trivial. We could do them before we had technology. So, okay, we could do research. We had to go to a library, but we could do it. Now it's a lot easier. We can use, the computer to do it. But what about the powerful uses? What about the things we couldn't do before? Real-time connections, useful apps, big data. I was thinking that if you wanted to do a survey, and kids have always done surveys, right? Teachers, in particular in primary school, have always said, okay, survey the class and find out how many people think this or that, or survey the school. Now you could go to those same kids and say, I want you to survey 1 million kids, because they have the tools. And you don't even have to tell them which tools to use. You can let them figure out how to do it. And then when they come back with 1 million responses, you could say, now find some big data tools and the kinds of ways we do that, and analyze that data and come up with some interesting conclusions. These primary kids could do that. They can create simulations of the history of the world or the history of their town or whatever it is. They can do robotics that solve real problems. We have these robotics that shoot balls through hoops and things like that, or frisbees in the air. And I love FIRST robotics, but we have a lot of problems in the world that robots can help solve, whether it's finding landmines or other things like this, that we are counting on the adults to do when the kids can actually probably do it in more creative ways. So instead of just doing old things in new ways, we should really be using the technology in powerful ways to improve the world. And finally, I'll say a few words on curriculum. I could talk about this all day. I've written a book on this, but the answer, and this is a really tough discussion. We've focused our curriculum, our core curriculum, on math and language and science and social studies. And we've done that for a long time, and that was all standardized a little over 100 years ago by a committee of 10 university presidents in the US, and in Europe it got standardized differently. But what we're moving to today is not that content, because not everybody needs that same content. Not everybody needs calculus. Not everybody even needs algebra. But they need the skills to think and act and relate and accomplish effectively. So those are lifelong skills, and we want our kids to understand that they're started on those lifelong skills of thinking and action and relationship and accomplishment, and they should be getting better at those things. And we can break them down, and I don't have time to go through this with you, but if you looked into my book or on my website, you'll see that there's at least 50 of these things that these are basic human skills that everybody needs: listening, networking, patience, resilience, entrepreneurship, innovation, different kinds of thinking. that we really I don't think, do a good enough job of pointing out to our kids. We're very narrowly focused on a small set of them. So I don't think any single one of these should be omitted from an education. So we don't want to learn them all in advance. We don't have time to learn everything about all those things in advance, but we can learn what we need as the kids do these projects. And instead of just having a preset amount of content that we have to, we were talking about covering content. And my idea of covering content is you put all the textbooks in the middle of the room, take a big blanket, and you cover the content. Okay, it's covered. We've done it. What we want is to do these projects and skills because they come from the passions and interests and abilities of the kids. And they don't come top down, they come bottom up. It turns out that's a much, much better way to do education for today's kids. I'm not saying it was in the past, but for today's and tomorrow's kids. So to put it all together and sum up, and then we can talk about this, we all want our kids to be educated, but what education is, I believe, is changing. The kids have already started to do this on their own to improve the world in many ways here at this school, in the IB program, and in different ways all around the world. Our job is to make them more powerful. That's really what I see the job of the schools. And so the kids leave and they, wow, they came out of this school. They came out of ISD. Look what they can do. Look how powerful those kids are. And it requires that we don't just give them what we got, which is some of the stuff we do. We want to give a civilization level change. We want to think about education differently, a new paradigm, empowering our students, bettering their world, real projects, and uniqueness. And this new way is better for the kids because they get what they need, what they really need, but it's also better for us because we get all these powerful kids in the world who are making the world a better place. We've been ignoring a lot of our workforce for a long time because at one time they were overly exploited and we said, no, we'll just put them in school for X number of years. But now we have kids who can do things intellectually and physically that don't exploit them, that use their skills and let them contribute to the world, and we need to do that. They need an education that empowers them further to better their world. And the great part for me is that I see the world creating this. So we're on the ground floor of a new world to come that's full of imagination, it's full of creativity. That's a house that's made from a 747 that was sitting in the desert. I met the architect. Full of innovation, full of entrepreneurial spirit, and I'm a huge optimist. And I look at you, and I look at you, and I look at you, and I'm a huge optimist about the future because I'm an optimist about the kids and what they can do and what they want to do. And I mean all kids, not just my kids, not just the kids at ISD. I saw this online that was, I don't know how old it is, but it was something about describing the kid who goes to ISD. And I thought, wait, I'd like to do that a little bit differently. Here's what I'd like the kids to say when they finish or when they're in a school, this school in particular, but a school of the quality of this school. I can think effectively, I can act effectively, I can relate effectively, I can accomplish effectively, and I'm on my way to becoming a good, empowered, world-improving person who continuously adds value to my world. So let's be sure we give these kids an education that helps them become good, empowered, world-improving people who know how to add value to their world. Thank you. So, if anybody's head is spinning, that's good.
We'd love for you to stay, ask questions right now. We have questions from the audience. Would you like to engage in conversation? We want you to. Thank you, Mark, so much.
Okay, how do we do in time? 8, okay. Anybody have something that you'd like to discuss. And I'll tell you what questions I really like, that I really encourage. I encourage questions that start with, yes, but. Yes, but our kids have to go into college. Yes, but we're in Germany. Yes, but, whatever they are, those questions, if we don't talk about those questions, we don't really get at the underlying things that we need to address. So if you have a yes, but question, feel free. If you don't in this context, you can email me. I'm happy to do these things. Yes?
I think you just mentioned the very most important for parents, most important yes, but question, which is yes, but they have to do good grades to get a good project.
And they don't have to necessarily spend as much time doing that as they do. So yes, so I changed the yes buts into yes and. Yes, we want our kids to go to college. We know that the first cut in a lot of high colleges is their grade point average and their IB diploma and all these things. That's why they're here, right? But there's nothing that says they have to spend every minute of their time to the point where a kid on the student council said to me yesterday, I wish I had more time for my public speaking interest and my this interest and my that interest. I don't have time. I have to do this. It's so time consuming to do this stuff. There are probably other ways. Because we don't have kids who are, at the bottom. We have kids who are at the top. And they're not all the same. Every kid is individual. But I bet we could do better. And I think we're exploring that. I think that's one of the things I love about this school, and of talking to Simon and of talking to the faculty, is they're open to exploring this. Nobody wants to give up getting your kid into college, right? Why would you? Even though in the long run that might not be what you need, but today it is. And so how do we do that and move to this future and help our kids if they're, when a kid, say wants to go to one of the very top schools, Harvard or Cambridge or those kinds of schools, everybody who applies to that school has a 4.3 average, grade point average. Everybody has some nice diploma. What they look for is a group of peers who are very specialized, who are unique, who have those other qualities. And that has to be above this other stuff. So we have to find ways to do both. And if one, if we're overemphasizing something, then we need to put it back into proportion. And that's really what I'm arguing. Yes?
I think a lot of us agree with this concept. Where do you start?
Well, I think we're starting. I think we're doing that. I think we're starting by saying things like, gee, those individual projects were great. We could take it further. We could do more of them. We couldn't do more of them if we do every single thing that we're required to do today, but maybe we can do less of some of those things, or maybe we can do some of those things more quickly, or maybe we can eliminate pieces that used to be really important that we don't think quite are now. So you start by adjusting the balance, and by saying there's a traditional thing that we know we did forever and we still know how to do it, and we're good at it. You're very good at that. But how do we adjust the balance to also take in the new things that kids need, which is accomplishment? That's how I think you start. And people have suggested, and I heard even here somebody said they knew somebody, my friend in Palo Alto says, okay, 20%, one day a week. Let's do something different. Let's let it be student-led. Let's let it be based on their passions and their projects and stuff like that. And someone that I talked to over the course of this, my visit here, said, yeah, I know a teacher who does that. Oh, it was the science teacher. Who was it?
Kevin Collins.
Who's here? Where's Kevin? Is he here? Raise your hand, kid. Oh, there he is. Kevin does that. So you're already started around those things. Does it work, Kevin? Okay, there you go. You got a question? See Kevin. Okay. What? Okay, but the thing is, and that's what I say when I mean it's emerging. I say that in any school I go to, in any place I go to, there is a Kevin. there is a person who said, you know, it's not enough to do what I used to be doing because the kids need more. I'm going to give them opportunities to do that as much as I can. And I think that's the best way to put it, is readjusting the balance. Anyone else? I'm so glad you were here, Kevin. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you very much. If you are shy and didn't want to ask in front of the big group, we would like to invite you up. We have a reception upstairs, so we would love for you to be able to stay, even if kids are not to school night, but it's only a half day tomorrow for you. So please join us. Come on up. You can mingle, talk amongst yourselves, because we're hoping for, by having speakers like Marc Prensky, that we're starting conversations. We hope that you will engage in these conversations with us. We hope you'll be part of it. We hope that you'll allow Mark to be part of it while he's still here. It just so happens, if I can, we also have Chris Wright here, who's been doing workshops with our teachers on our approaches to learning. So maybe you can corner him. You can talk to teachers about some of what they've been doing for learning. Because while your children are off half day tomorrow, your teachers and staff will all still be here. We will be learning together. We'll continue our day with Marc Prensky. We'll continue our day with Chris Wright. And we will continue to learn, to improve, so that we can help to take action, to accomplish, to achieve, and build our relationships with you and with
Can I ask one question? So there are a number of young people here. You two I met, and you're here, and you're here. How many of you stayed awake the whole time? Okay. Of those, well, you didn't. Of those of you who did, or who heard parts of it, what'd you think? Did you agree? Was it interesting? Was it something that interested you? What did you think? Have anything you can say? Did you like it? Or was it boring? You didn't understand all of it. I'm going to have a special session with you and explain it to you. And I understand that. This is adult stuff too. What do you think?
Interesting. I like the old way of doing things. I prefer the way, like, you get a good grade and then you just do things.
Okay. Well, I think we have a mic here. This is important to hear, because when you have a perspective, we listen to you. I hope it's on. Does it work?
Hello?
Yes?
Okay, it does.
So what were you saying?
So I feel secure if I get a good grade. I don't need to think about doing these new things.
Okay. And are you good at playing school and getting good grades?
Yeah.
Yeah, you learned that. Good. Well, good for you. And you want to say anything? Either of you? No. Okay, that's fine. And we're going to have a student panel tomorrow. That's another thing we're going to have. We have particular students who've been invited to come and talk, and we want to hear the opinions of where do you think things are going, what do you love, what are you comfortable with, and so I invite you all, if you want, to come to that. When is that? At what time?
1:15.
At 1:15. If you happen to be free in the middle of the day at 1:15, you're welcome to join us. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And thank you.